Hey, welcome to Leader Feeder. It's Kirk, and we're here with practical leadership tips for you and your team. So before we get started on today's episode, I wanted to take a moment just to mention our Plant Manager Excellence Program. We're doing a public workshop version, meaning that you can send your plant manager or plant managers from multiple sites to a central location. We're going to do it just outside of Chicago, easily accessible for lots of folks. So if you have plant managers that you think want to really hone in on what it takes to be a really effective plant manager, have an ownership-like mentality and how to think like an owner, build on a little bit on their financial acumens, and really make sure that they're thinking about operational excellence and how to get their people to help achieve that, the Plant Manager Excellence Program public workshop might be for you. You can find more about that on our website at uniquedevelopment.com. That's starting in October, so you have a few months to think about it, but we know that it takes time to kind of come to these decisions. So we're giving you lots of heads up, and we hope to see you there in October. All right, so today we're going to talk a little bit about empowerment, and we talk a fair bit about empowerment in the Leader Feeder podcast and show. We talk about, you need to empower your people and try to empower them. And for this episode, we got talking about, what if you have already tried empowering people? You gave it the good old college try. You thought, I'm going to try to empower people, and it didn't pan out. Then what? What do we do next? And so I wanted to address that a little bit because I know in my own management experience, I've certainly empowered people to varying effectiveness, right? To varying success. Sometimes you empower someone, you give them that different little bit of responsibility, and they roll with it, and they do a really great job, and they're successful. And you as a leader, you get to celebrate. Hey, you're amazing. You knocked it out of the park. You surpassed our expectations. All of those awesome things. And then other times you try to empower somebody and it doesn't work out the way you expect. It's not to say that it blows up in your face and it's an enormous disaster and a whole bunch of money is wasted or anything like that per se, but it doesn't turn out the way you expected. And when that happens, there's a couple directions you can go in. I think the most common direction that we tend to see is that the leader gets a little bit scared, to be honest. They get a little bit skittish and they go, no, I knew this whole empowerment thing was a mistake. I should have just done it myself because I know that I can do it right and I know that I can do it the way that it needs to be done or that I want to see it done. And so they take that responsibility that they tried to bestow to another team member, someone on their team, and they take it back. And then they start doing things for themselves, or rather by themselves. And so whether it's completing a report, whether it's, doing a maintenance check on a machine, whether it's even just checking, doing a little bit of cleaning in a work area, those small things end up, we try to give someone, we try to empower somebody to take that task on, and instead it falls back in our lap. And we're afraid the second time to try to re-empower someone, to try to get them to fix the behavior so that they do that thing, that task better the second time. And I think it's something that causes a fair bit of frustration because I think many leaders want to believe in the best in their employees and they want to go, yeah, my people want to do well, but what happens when they don't do well or when they don't meet the leader's expectations for a particular task or assignment? So direction number one, like I said, is that when that happens, the leader just takes the work back. I'm just going to have to do it. I'm the only one that can do it. And for some people, that might even feel good to kind of go, oh, I knew there was a reason I was doing it in the first place. It's because I'm the one that does it right. I'm the one that does it best. However, if you think about, that approach, it's a vicious cycle, right? It's a cycle that just goes down. It's a race to the bottom because how many things can the leader possibly take back before they've got too much on their plate? And a leader that's trying to have a proactive approach to running their team or their department, they're trying to free up a bit of time so they can be more present, checking in with their team. The more things they take back, probably some of you are familiar with the idea of the monkeys on your back. How many monkeys can you pile up on your back before it's really hard to move? It's hard to get anything done because you're hunched over, got all these monkeys on your back. So you've got to make sure that when something does, you try to empower someone and it doesn't go as expected, the result isn't as good as you'd like. Instead of just taking the task back, and whether that's you wanting to take the task back or whether it's the team member saying, see, I guess I can't do it. I shouldn't have been trusted with it. You should have done it. What I want to encourage you to try is clarifying and correcting and not taking the task back. So when they're trying to, calibrate a machine or whatever it might be, when they're, doing a task and it doesn't go the way you expected, think to yourself, what exactly didn't go as I expected? Was the entire thing a disaster? In most cases, the answer is no. Not everything was an entire disaster. Sorry. In most cases, the answer is not yes, right? The answer is no. No, not everything was a complete disaster. There were a few things that weren't done correctly or up to a certain standard. So then ask yourself, as a leader, did I clarify the standard? Was I clear on what my expectations were? Or was I more vague than I would have liked to? We do this interesting activity in our training programs where we divide the room into two teams. And on the left side, we give them a set of everybody a piece of paper with the same thing on it. And on the right side, we give them a different piece of paper, but everyone gets a piece of paper with that same writing on it. Now, I'm going to kind of let you in on the secret. Everyone on the left gets a piece of paper that says, line up in order without talking or making any motions or gestures. Okay. On the right side, there says line up from tallest to shortest without making any, without talking and without making any gestures or anything. So on the left, they're just told to line up. And then they're also told, the second part of the piece of paper says, raise your hand so the instructor can confirm whether or not you did the task correctly. But it just says line up against the wall. On the right, it says line up against the wall, tallest to shortest. And same thing, raise your hand when you think you've completed the task so the instructor can let you know. This is an activity in the power and importance of clarity, because here's kind of the trick of it. The instructor, whatever happens on the left side, whenever the left side raises their hand, and remember, these are the ones that were told just line up. The instructor says, nope, do it again, not correct. And so they kind of get confused because they've usually arranged themselves by height, although it's not always that, but that's usually what they pick, because when you can't communicate, it's hard to do things like dates of birth or seniority or anything like that. It's a lot easier just to kind of look at everyone's height and arrange yourselves accordingly. But the instructor purposely goes, nope, that's not what I had in mind, rearrange, do it again, still not right. On the right side, they go tallest to shortest. And I should mention that because they're on opposing sides of the room, the left side can see what the right side is doing. And so they'll often kind of mimic it, because some of them realize early on, well, we weren't told how to line up. We were just told to line up. The right side is given the strict instruction of go tallest to shortest. So they do it. They raise their hand, and the instructor, looks like that kind of happy teacher and goes, great job. You did it. Awesome. And the idea is that whoever gets it first wins. And often the left side actually finishes sooner than the right side because they're just told to line up. And yet it's always the right side that wins. And the debrief to this is really important, because once you sit down and you say, left side, what was your task? They say, oh, well, we were told to line up. Great. Right side, what was your task? And they say, well, we were told to line up tallest to shortest. Oh, interesting. So then when you do the debrief, you're asking them, you understand, or the other side understands what task they were asked, and then you have to say to them, so why did you fail the task and why did you succeed at the task? And usually someone will bring up, well, we weren't told how to line up, and no matter how we lined ourselves up, you told us it was wrong. How is that fair? And you're like, yeah, that's a great question. Think of when a leader doesn't provide clear instructions. They know what they want. They know what they expect, they know what they're looking for, but they don't communicate what they're looking for clearly or effectively. So then whatever they're going to get back, they're going, no, that's not what I wanted. That's not what I had in mind. And that same thing, coming back to empowerment, that same thing can happen. When you empower someone, you have to make sure that you're giving them the tools to be successful in whatever task you're trying to empower them to do. And one of the biggest tools you can provide is clear instructions, clear expectations. We say on this show a fair bit recently that the supervisor, a leader's job is to relentlessly remove ambiguity. And so you want to ask yourself, have I given really clear instructions? Because if the task comes back not done properly or not done to the level you expected, the first thing you want to ask is, did I clarify effectively enough? Did I give clear enough instructions? Okay. And so if you're taking the task back because you're like, oh, they don't get it, first ask yourself, is it actually because I didn't clarify well enough? And if I could clarify, if I could say, hey, this is the way you did it, here's the way I would have liked to see it done, let's try this again. And even the second time, it might still not be done perfectly, but again, we get better and better as we clarify and as that person gets better at doing it the way we'd like them to do it. I'd also encourage you to think about your role as a leader. A lot of leaders are really good at their jobs, but they're not necessarily good trainers. And that's an important distinction, because as a leader, you do spend often a fair bit of time training people to do stuff. But if that's not something that comes naturally to you, if that's not something that you're good at, if it's not something you enjoy, then it's kind of understandable that the idea of empowering is perhaps even exhausting is the right word, because you're thinking, I got to train this person to do it, and then they're not going to do it right, and I got to fix it. And, so instead you just do stuff yourself. But I encourage you as a leader to remember that a big part of your role is to empower others, to train people to do stuff. And so don't expect necessarily that the first time you ask someone to do something, the first time you are empowering someone on your team to try something new, maybe don't have the expectation that they should do it perfectly. Have an expectation instead that there will be a small miscommunication in how they do it and what your expectations are, and that you're going to need to clarify. If you think of, how we raise children, for example, we know that it's going to take lots of attempts for them to learn how to do most things. And I'm not certainly saying that your team members are children by any means, but people learning in general, it's an iterative process. We learn a little bit, then we make some mistakes, we learn from those mistakes, we do better the next time. Rather than assuming that everybody should do everything perfectly the first time and that, my instructions must always be perfect, that's probably not the case to assume that. So instead, assume that there's probably going to be a little bit of a gap between what you'd like to see and what you're seeing, and then ask yourself, how do I close that gap? And doing so will make you probably a little calmer and probably a little more patient with that new person or that person you're giving a new task to, because you're automatically going to say, yeah, empowering doesn't mean that I say go ahead and do it and you do it perfectly the very first time. It probably means that I will need to do this multiple times in order for us to get it right, and that's okay. All right. So I really encourage you when it comes to empowering, if you've tried it already, first of all, kudos to you, because if you've been a leader that's tended to hold stuff close to you and you've thought to yourself, I'm just going to take care of it myself, and now you're trying to empower and it feels like it's kind of, coming back at you in a negative way, kudos to you for making that attempt, because that's also you learning, right? That's you trying something new. So give yourself a pat on the back rather than going, I tried this and it completely failed. And instead just ask yourself, what do I need to tweak or do a little bit differently? The other thing, kind of the last thing that I'll mention that I want you to think about is the learning zone. So many of you are familiar with the idea of the learning zone model. There's 3 concentric circles, so 3 circles that get bigger and bigger. And in the innermost circle, it's our comfort zone. It's the things that we're good at doing. It's typically the things we like doing. We find it sort of easy. We can do it to some degree on autopilot. It's all good. The next level is what we call the learning zone, and that's where we do a lot of our learning, right? So it's things where it's not completely out of our wheelhouse. It's not something that we have no connection to, but it's new information. It's a new task, right? And then the third zone is the panic zone. And the panic zone is where we don't want to be. Now, if you think about old school leadership, we did tend to put people in the panic zone a lot. It's that whole sink or swim mentality, baptism by fire. They're either going to figure it out or they're going to drown, and then we're going to know whether or not they're a good fit. And maybe to some degree, maybe in certain industries, that is an effective method. But I don't agree that in most cases, that's the way to do it, to just throw someone in the deep end and see if they survive. I think the better method in most cases is to, instead of pushing them out of their comfort zone all the way to the panic zone, where they feel overwhelmed, where they don't understand what's going on, they can't sort of get traction. Instead, you want to push them into the learning zone, where it's new information, new work, new tasks, but sort of within the realm of what they can handle, and it's not going to immediately overwhelm them. And you've almost primed them a little bit. So instead of me being like, hey, have you ever seen this machine before? And the person goes, no. And I go, well, good luck. Instead, I take the time, well, this is what this machine does. This is its function. This is how it kind of works. Let me walk you through some of the basics. And then I say, okay, I want you to try it yourself a little bit. So that's how we go from comfort zone to learning zone, rather than comfort zone all the way to panic zone. I'll also mention, as a side bonus, if you want to call it that, if you push too many people too often from their comfort zone to their panic zone, you might eventually lose them, because people don't like being pushed into their panic zone. And if they feel like every time they have to try something new or different, you're just going to put them out to left field and overwhelm them and stress them out, they'll probably disconnect, right? They'll probably leave because they want to go somewhere where there's a bit more of a structured training program in place, so they're not constantly overwhelmed by what they're learning or what they're being expected to learn. So you might say, baptism by fire, sink or swim, it's all good. But lots of other companies are cluing in that that's not the best way to train people, and they're providing more structure. And in terms of remaining competitive when it comes to keeping employees on board, it's important to remember that putting people, too far out too often is gonna scare them a bit. So coming back to this empowerment idea, ask yourself, what would they're in their comfort zone now, what would the learning zone look like versus the panic zone? And that's sometimes a tough question, but think yourself, when have you been expected to learn something really big or really new and you found it overwhelming or scary? And how can you sort of minimize that a bit for your employees? What instructions or clarity can you provide so that it's a less overwhelming task or job task that you're asking them to try out? I encourage you to think about, instead of just taking the task back when I tried to empower, I'm going to go back, I'm going to clarify, and I'm going to correct so that they do better the next time. And I'm going to remember that often when people are learning, it is an iterative process, meaning that we need to learn from the experience and keep trying until we get it right. And with that, thanks for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed the episode and, got a little tip or a trick. By the way, we're always curious to know what you're getting out of this. So if you'd like to leave us a comment, we would love that. And if you're listening via the podcast, we'd love it if you would subscribe and rate the podcast. That really helps new listeners find us. And with that, we'll see you next time.